Did you ask the Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden?
No, actually, I didn't. I asked the Ukraine to investigate the allegations that there was interference in the election of 2016 by the Ukrainians for the benefit of Hillary Clinton, for which there already is a court
never asked
finding.
anything about Hunter Biden. You never asked anything about Joe Biden.
The only
and his
thing
role
I
with the
asked about
prosecutor.
Joe Biden is to get to the bottom of how it was that Lutsenko, who was appointed, dismissed the case against Antak.
So you did ask Ukraine to look into Joe Biden?
Of course I did.
You just said you didn't.
No, I didn't ask him to look into Joe Biden. I asked him to look into the allegations that related to my client, which tangentially involved Joe Biden in a massive bribery scheme.
Rudy.
Conversation I had was largely congratulatory, was largely corruption, all of the corruption taking place, was largely the fact that we don't want our people, like Vice President Biden and his son, creating to the corruption already in the Ukraine. In Ukraine's got a lot of problems. The new president is saying that he's going to be able to rid the country of corruption. And I said that would be a great thing.
Trump's doing this because he knows I'll beat him like a drum. And he's using the abuse of power and every element of the presidency to try to do something to smear me.
Should he be impeached?
Everybody looked at this, and everybody's looked at it and said there's nothing there. Ask the right question.
Mr. Biden, should he be impeached for this?
Pardon me?
Should he be impeached for this?
Depending on what the House finds, he could be impeached, but I'm not making that judgment now.
A controversial and crazy couple of days in our nation's history. New York's former mayor, Rudy Giuliani, has been front and center for plenty of it. The president's attorney has tried to clear up his remarks from that now viral CNN interview. Giuliani said that the idea that he went to the Ukraine on a political mission to get former Vice President Joe Biden in trouble is ridiculous. But the president acknowledged Sunday that he did indeed talk about Biden during a July phone call with the Ukrainian president. And, as you saw, Trump defended that exchange as perfectly appropriate, but Democrats aren't buying it and seem to be inching closer towards impeachment. There's certainly a lot to unpack here, so let's bring in our next two guests. Nayala Almaru is a Democratic advocacy and political strategist. You might also recognize her from the 2016 DNC, where she formally nominated Hillary Clinton for president. And we're also joined again by former Republican Congressman Michael Grimm, who represented Staten Island and parts of Brooklyn. Welcome to you both.
Very nice to be here.
So as I said, there was a lot to unpack with this weekend's situation. I'm not even sure where to begin, what to call it officially. We have a whistleblower complaint, we have allegedly a report that no one has seen, and now we have denials and clarifications. So I'll start with you, Michael. What were your reactions to this weekend?
Well, first of all, I think the mayor misspoke. You know, there's a lot of people trying to say, we got him. We have Rudy Giuliani, not telling the truth. He very quickly clarified his statement, and he simply misspoke. So I think that's really nothing. They're just trying to fan the fire.
Just to be clear, because there's so many different moving pieces with this, what did he misspeak on?
Well, when he was first asked, did you ask about investigating Joe Biden, I think he misspoke in the sense that he didn't personally say, you'll just investigate Joe Biden for the purpose of investigating the vice president. In the context of the corruption of Ukraine, and you have to ask yourself, how is it that his son, who's certainly not qualified to be putting together international deals of $1 billion and more for two different countries, how would he get such contacts and such contracts if his father wasn't not only the vice president, but in charge of doling out money to those specific countries? So when you look at that, it just doesn't pass the smell test, and of course it should be investigated.
Nayala, I'm sure you've got thoughts.
I do have thoughts. So when I was watching the interview, I was thinking one of two things. Based off of his behavior, there's absolutely no strategy behind what he's saying. And the second thought was, well, given the pattern of behavior, he may very well be laying out the facts out there and just really beginning the process of spin 101. If we get the facts out there, anticipating the arguments that he knows the Trump administration will have to make at some point in the future as more facts come out, then he's really just desensitizing the public as to, well, this is old news, so what's the big deal? Which is straight from the playbook that the administration has taken from when it came to previous incidences as well. And also, I think going into the fact that an investigation was already had with Biden's son, and no evidence was found that any wrongdoing had in fact occurred.
Well, can I just ask a question?
Sure.
Does anyone feel comfortable with the fact that a young man, Hunter Biden, who certainly doesn't have any background dealing with Ukraine. He had a very spotty military record, does not have a great background at all, is sealing international deals with Ukraine and China, well over $1 billion each, getting paid $50,000 a month with no credentials. But his father is the vice president in charge. Even if you say by the letter of the law it was legal, does anyone feel comfortable with that? Is that what we want? Just the mere, how it looks to the general public. Your father is the vice president in charge of giving money to these countries, and the son, who's certainly not qualified, you can't even argue he's qualified, has zero credentials, is signing $1.5 billion deals with China.
Okay, it does bring up two questions. One is that, first of all, how you know all of this information, because we haven't at least seen this reporting fleshed out yet. And then two, given this current administration, we've seen a fair share of people who might not be traditionally qualified taking on very, very prominent and important roles. Within this administration, we're not talking about the vice president, we're talking about the president.
But they're appointed, okay? People are appointed to positions. This was a private sector position that the Ukrainian government and the Chinese government hired him directly.
But isn't the private sector supposed to be free to do whatever it wants?
Oh, absolutely. I don't blame China, and I don't blame Ukraine.
Okay.
All I'm saying is, if the son of the vice president suddenly, out of nowhere, with no background, no credentials, suddenly gets these types of contracts, you have to shake your head and say, it must be because of his father. And his father did come out on television and brag about the fact that he got the prosecutor fired who was investigating the very company that was giving Joe Biden's son $50,000 a month retainer as a consultant.
That is true. I do want to clarify, though, that a lot of countries had a lot of issues with that particular investigator in the Ukraine, as I understand. There were ties to Russian oligarchs, allegedly. There's a lot more reporting to come out in this.
Of course, but just for appearance purposes, if I'm Joe Biden, I wouldn't go anywhere near that if my son works for that company that's being investigated. You would stay away from that just out of common sense, because it doesn't look appropriate. It's the appearance of impropriety. I think it was much more than that. I want to be clear. I do think that they crossed the line and they should never have done any of that. But even for the appearance of impropriety, why would you do that if you're the vice president of the United States?
Nyla, one of the big questions is we haven't seen too much movement about the big I word impeachment, because Nancy Pelosi, of course, wants bipartisan support for it. Everything that the congressman said, he's poking holes in this story. Is this something that's going to land with the American public?
This is a game changer for Democrats. You know, up to this point, Speaker Pelosi has been very strategic in terms of trying to hold off on impeachment because there are political ramifications. We don't have the House going into election year if we put our moderate and our centrist and our swing districts at risk. And so this was a political calculation not to pursue impeachment. But in light of the facts, in light of what is continuing to come out, I think on Friday morning, given that that was the deadline for Thursday that the speaker gave for the Trump administration to turn over the whistleblower complaint to the intelligence chair, Congressman Adam Schiff, I think that this is a game changer in terms of we have, as Democrats from the congressional level, tried to make the argument why impeachment is not in the best interest, in the best interest for party, for political reasons, what have you. But this is really a question of, do we choose electoral wins or do we choose democracy? And what does that mean for us as a party, and what does that mean for us as Americans moving forward? And I think that on Friday morning, depending on what happens, we will have our answer.
If I may, 2 words. The Mueller report. The Democrats from the very beginning said, the Mueller report is going to show collusion. It's going to show that there were high crimes and so on and so forth with the president. We're going to be able to impeach him. And the Mueller report came out, and now that's not good enough. The truth is there was collusion with the Democratic Party. Okay, you want to talk about foreign nationals being involved? Look at what happened. How did all of this start to investigate the Trump organization and the Trump campaign, all through phony dossiers that were paid by the Clinton campaign in part, and through operatives from foreign countries, whether it was British foreign spies and whether they were using Ukrainians who were then using Russians. But all of that has come to light now, and the report came out, no collusion. So I really think that this is hurting the Democrat Party. I think it's backfiring. I think when you look at the elections, African Americans, Latinos, more and more of the base of the Democratic Party is being siphoned off, and they're going Republican for this very reason. They're tired of it. They see through it. They know this is a smokescreen. The truth is, from day one, the Democrats tried to delegitimize the election of Donald Trump. They can't accept the fact that he won. They can't accept the fact that he beat Hillary Clinton. They can't accept the fact that his ideas are actually working and his policies are good for the country. And I think that this is another failed attempt, and it is going to backfire come 2020.
All right, well, then, Nyla, how do you see this, particularly working for Joe Biden, who is the Democratic frontrunner as of this moment?
So I think in reference to the assertion that the Democratic base in terms of African Americans and Latinos are siphoning to the Republican Party is simply not true. I think that there is, I think, a point to be made in terms of what does this mean for messaging and candidates running for 2020. I think that for Biden, it just shows that Trump is scared that he is the candidate that can beat him, which goes into why he would potentially ask for support in terms of an investigation that was already closed and had already shown that there was no evidence of any wrongdoing. So I think that for Biden, if anything, it just reaffirms that he knows that he is the candidate that Trump is most afraid of, that he is the candidate to beat. And I think in terms of moving forward for all the presidential candidates, I think it just kind of reframes the conversation in terms of, are we going to make a loud and unapologetic call for impeachment, regardless of what that may mean politically in terms of electoral wins come next election cycle? Or do we choose to be the party that holds on to American values and tries to hold on to the last semblance of democracy here in America?
We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you, both of you. I'd love to have you both back as this story continues to develop, as we expect it will. That wraps up this edition of Metro Focus. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. I'm Jenna Flanagan.